I'm going to tell you something most people don't say out loud. Attraction doesn't stay the same forever. What someone wants, what they value, what they're drawn to, it changes. Not randomly, but in phases. And if you don't understand those shifts, you'll keep getting confused because the same behavior that works at one stage completely fails at another. And today, we're going to talk about 3 key phases where relationship priorities change and the brutal truth behind each one. Let's start with the first phase. Before we dive deeper, a quick message. If you've been learning from my videos and you want to support this work, you can subscribe to me on Facebook with a paid membership, send stars, or join my YouTube channel's paid community. Your support helps me create more powerful content for you, and I truly appreciate every bit of it. All right, now let's continue. Phase number 1, exploration and emotional discovery. This is where everything feels new, exciting, unpredictable. At this stage, attraction is often driven by emotion, intensity, chemistry, curiosity. People are figuring out what they like, what they don't, what excites them. And here's the truth. Stability is not always the priority here. Experiences. Feeling something different matters more than feeling something consistent. Now, here's where most people misunderstand this phase. They try to force seriousness too early. They want clarity, commitment, definition. But at this stage, that pressure can actually push people away because it interrupts exploration. Now, here's the deeper layer. People are also discovering themselves, their identity, their boundaries, their preferences. So relationships during this phase often reflect growth, not permanence. Now let's move to the second phase, because this is where everything starts to shift. Phase number 2, clarity and emotional stability. This phase feels different, less chaotic, more intentional. Now, people start valuing consistency, communication, emotional safety, reliability. And here's the brutal truth. What once felt exciting can now feel exhausting. The same unpredictability, the same emotional highs and lows start to lose their appeal because now peace becomes more attractive than intensity. Now this is where many connections fail because one person is still in exploration while the other has moved into clarity, and that mismatch creates confusion. Now here's something important. At this stage, people are more selective, not because they have more options, but because they understand themselves better. They know what works and what doesn't. Now let's go deeper, because the third phase is where priorities become even sharper. Phase number 3, alignment and long-term thinking. At this stage, attraction isn't just about feelings. It's about compatibility, lifestyle, values, direction. People start asking different questions. Does this person fit into my life? Do we want the same things? Can this actually last? And here's the truth most people don't talk about. Chemistry alone is no longer enough. You can feel a strong connection and still walk away if there's no alignment. Now, here's where things become very clear. Time starts to matter more. Energy becomes more valuable, and emotional investment becomes more intentional. Now, let's pause for a moment, because this is where everything connects. These phases aren't fixed by age. They're influenced by experience, growth, self-awareness, and this is why people get confused in relationships, because they assume everyone is in the same phase as them, but they're not. Now, here's the key insight. Attraction isn't just about who you are. It's about when you meet someone. Timing changes everything. You can be the right person, but meet at the wrong phase, and it doesn't work. Now, let me give you something practical. Instead of trying to force connection, start recognizing the phase someone is in. Are they exploring? Are they seeking stability? Are they looking for alignment? Because once you understand that, your approach changes, naturally. Now, here's the deeper truth. The goal isn't to fit into someone else's phase. It's to find someone who aligns with yours. Because when both people are in the same phase, Everything feels easier, more natural, less forced, and that's where real connection grows. Now let's go even further, because understanding the three phases intellectually is very different from navigating them in real life, and that gap is where most people lose their way. So let's go back to each phase and uncover what's really happening underneath, the truth beneath phase number 1. The exploration phase gets a bad reputation. People look back on it and say, I was immature, I didn't know what I wanted, I was just having fun. And while some of that is true, there's something valuable in this phase that rarely gets acknowledged. It's where you develop emotional vocabulary. You learn what connection actually feels like by experiencing different versions of it. You learn your own patterns, what you're drawn to, what triggers you, what you're willing to accept, and what you're not. And without that learning, you can't make genuinely informed choices later. The problem isn't the exploration phase itself. The problem is staying in it long after you've outgrown it. Because some people get comfortable in the chaos. The novelty becomes addictive. The highs feel irreplaceable. And the idea of something steady, something consistent, starts to feel boring. But here's what's actually happening in those moments. They haven't outgrown the phase. They've just learned to confuse intensity with depth, and those two things are not the same. Intensity is a feeling, depth is a foundation. Intensity fades, depth builds. And until someone understands that difference, they'll keep chasing the feeling while wondering why nothing ever lasts. The truth beneath phase number 2, the clarity phase, is where things get interesting. Because on the surface, it looks like progress. People start making more deliberate choices, they communicate better, they enforce boundaries, they walk away from things that don't align, and all of that is real growth. But here's the part that doesn't get discussed enough. The clarity phase can also become a trap, because some people, in their desire for stability, become overly cautious. They intellectualize every connection. They analyze before they feel. They protect themselves so thoroughly that they never actually let anyone in. And then they wonder why, even in stable, consistent dynamics, something feels missing. What's missing is vulnerability, because clarity without vulnerability is just walls with better architecture. You can have all the right standards, all the right communication skills, all the right emotional language, and still hold everyone at arm's length, because the real risk, the risk of being fully seen, feels too great. So here's the balance the clarity phase demands: selective openness. Not open to everyone, but genuinely open to the right person. Protective of your energy, but not so protected that connection becomes impossible. Because the goal of phase 2 isn't to become invulnerable, it's to become discerning. And those two things feel similar from the outside, but they're worlds apart on the inside. The truth beneath phase number 3, the alignment phase, is the most misunderstood of all. Because people hear alignment and they think it means finding someone identical to them, same goals, same lifestyle, same vision for the future. But that's not what alignment actually means. Alignment means your directions are compatible, not that your paths are identical. It means your values sit close enough together that building something shared doesn't require either person to fundamentally betray who they are. And this distinction matters because some people enter phase 3 and become so focused on finding the perfect match that they disqualify connections that could have been extraordinary. They create a checklist, and they filter everyone through it, and the people who don't check every box get dismissed before they've even had the chance to show who they truly are. But here's what the checklist misses: growth. People are not static. The person you meet today is not the same person they'll be in 2 years. And alignment isn't just about where someone is right now. It's about the direction they're moving. Are they growing? Are they self-aware? Are they willing to invest in becoming better? Because two people who are both genuinely growing in compatible directions can build something that no checklist could have predicted. So the wisdom of phase 3 isn't just about evaluating people, it's about evaluating trajectory, not just where they are, but where they're going, and whether that destination has room for you too. Now, let's talk about something that connects all 3 phases, the concept of phase mismatch, because this is the source of more heartbreak than almost anything else. And it rarely gets named for what it is. Phase mismatch is when two people meet, feel genuine chemistry, experience real connection, and still can't make it work. Not because they're incompatible as people, but because they're incompatible in timing. One person is in exploration, the other is in alignment, and no amount of chemistry can bridge that gap sustainably because they're literally wanting different things, not out of selfishness, not out of manipulation, but because they're in fundamentally different places emotionally. And here's the painful part. The person in alignment often interprets this mismatch as rejection. They think, I wasn't enough, I did something wrong, if I had been different, but none of that is true. The person in exploration wasn't rejecting them. They were just not ready. And it's no one's fault. It's just reality. And the sooner you can name phase mismatch for what it is, the faster you can stop taking it personally and start looking for someone whose timing matches yours. Now, here's something even more important: your own phase awareness. Because most people can identify what phase someone else is in long before they can identify what phase they're in themselves. And that self-blindness creates all kinds of problems. You might tell yourself you want something serious, while your behavior reveals you're still exploring. You might tell yourself you're ready for depth, while your choices keep gravitating toward intensity. And there's no judgment in that. But there is an invitation to get honest with yourself before you get into something with someone else. Because the clearest signal of your readiness isn't what you say you want, it's what you consistently choose. And if there's a gap between those two things, that's the work, not the other person, not the timing, not the circumstances. The work is in aligning what you say you want with what you're actually willing to build. Now, here's the final truth that ties all 3 phases together. No phase is better than another. They're not a hierarchy. They're not a timeline you have to rush through. They're stages of self-understanding. And everyone moves through them at their own pace, in their own order, sometimes cycling back through earlier phases, after significant life changes, after loss, after growth, after something that fundamentally shifts how you see the world. And that's not regression, that's human. The goal is not to reach phase 3 as quickly as possible. The goal is to understand where you are right now, honestly, clearly, without judgment. And to find someone who is standing in the same place, looking in the same direction. Because that is where real connection begins. Not in the perfect phase, not in the perfect timing, but in the honest acknowledgement of where you both actually are and the willingness to build from there. Attraction evolves, and so do people. So instead of trying to control outcomes, focus on understanding timing, alignment, and yourself. If this gave you a new perspective, if something clicked that hadn't before, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and go watch the next one, because we're only getting deeper from here. The people who understand this don't just navigate relationships better. They understand themselves on a level that changes everything: how they choose, how they love, how they grow. That's what we're building here, one truth at a time.